So this video is going to be on basic diagnostics for a no-start condition. Time and time again, I see that people have changed their timing belts, and for whatever reason, or maybe they haven't changed their timing belts, their wiring is off. So we're going to kind of go over the basics and the importance of VCDS and setting not only mechanical timing, but timing inside of VCDS through the hammer rod. As a quick peek, this is going to be the oil pan for the compound setup on the Cherokee. Thank you, Houston Alexander, for telling me this thing actually existed, so I didn't have to weld anything to it. So this will be the low pressure drain back into the oil pan. But yeah. All right, so let's talk about the mechanical side of things. Timing needs to be spot on, right? Now, there are ways to cheat without using the proper tools, but my recommendation is to spend the money and get the normal things that you need. You know, the cam lock. This is my own homemade pump sprocket lock. This is for doing the serpentine belt. These are garbage. They don't do shit. Don't waste your money. The cam pop-off tool, sprocket pop-off tool, and then this tool to tighten up the sprocket. Excuse me, the tensioner for the timing belt. Lock everything the way it's supposed to. I'm actually gonna, I think I have a video, I'll link it, how to do timing properly, but you basically want to put the crankshaft sprocket where it needs to be. You're gonna lock the pump. The pump cannot be 180 degrees out. It's one cycle, one revolution is all four. So you can't be 180 out. The cam sprocket needs to be on there, and the bolt needs to be snug up to the point where the sprocket won't fall off, but it needs to be able to freewheel. And of course, the cam needs to be locked in the right position with the first lobes basically pointing like this. But in the opposite direction or any other direction, you are 180 out on the camshaft. Adjust the camshaft, lock it with a tool similar to that. I love that thing to death. Put the belt on, make sure nothing turns when you're putting the belt on. If you have to adjust the pump sprocket away from the middle, just a little bit, from the 3 bolts that are in the center, to adjust it so that the belt slides on easier, do that. You can always adjust that later when we do the timing inside with VCDS. Okay, so what I like to do is I like to put a 13 millimeter here, take the tensioner, and start turning it and seeing if the crank at the bottom starts to move. If the crank starts to move, we need to adjust the pump a little bit. Or what you could do is counter hold it, meaning that if the sprocket is pulling this way, you're going to put a 19 millimeter 12 point on it with a bar and hold it in the opposite direction so that this moves and not that. Again, we shouldn't have to explain this. We're all intelligent people that have TDIs, right? And now we're going to kind of go into some of the same questions I see over and over again. Your wiring is up to you, right? You need to make sure that everything is working the way it's supposed to. If I remember correctly, the only thing that we need is the crank position sensor and the injection pump to technically run, okay? The N75, excuse me, the number 3 injector is needed as well to make it stabilize better. But I've actually run with a bad number 3 injector, and the only thing that I noticed while driving is that it was really down on power and kind of bouncing all over the place. But the coolant pressure sensor and the N75 aren't really needed to be wired up. Again, do it all, double check your work. So when you first key on the engine, the pump itself should click. The quantity adjuster, I think, is what's moving around. And then off. It'll move around, it'll get 12 volts to the solenoid. It's kind of, I don't have a pump over there. But right below here, there's a solenoid with a wire coming from the main loom. So it will power on for a few seconds, and then it'll power off. And then when we're cranking the key, it'll regain power, and the engine should start. What I've seen some people do is instead of, so sometimes on vehicles, there are 2 different types of ignition sources. There's one that remains powered while you're cranking, and some ancillary ignition systems are shut down so that it isn't pulling from the start capability of the engine to power, let's say, your radio or your lights or whatever it might be. So you need to verify with a buddy helper or, with clamps on a meter on the windshield, you need to make sure that the pump is getting 12 volts like it's supposed to while it's cranking. As long as that is set up electrically, you're perfectly fine. Now, I do run on both my swaps the Holly Black lift pump, so I am going to pull it out for the video. But having a lift pump helps the next step, which is bleeding the injectors. So because I have a lift pump in the back that pushes a tremendous amount of fuel forward, all I technically have to do is break all these 17 mils, tighten them up finger tight, keep the the transmission in neutral, and with that same 19 mil 12-point socket is rotate the engine. And I rotate the engine until fuel comes out of one of the injectors, and then I tighten it down. And then I rotate it again till the next one starts bleeding, and then I tighten it down. So it makes it a lot easier to prime the system, which again, you don't necessarily need all the time, but it also lets the engine run much, much, much better than without it. So I built a special tool, my own crow's foot, cut off a wrench, welded it up, attached it to an extension that helps me with that. But yeah, so if we have electricity or power to the system the way it's supposed to be, if we have fuel to all the injectors where all the air bubbles are out, if you don't have a pump, if you crank the engine over till you get sprays of fuel coming out, you tighten them up. And of course, if you don't have sprays of fuel, then that could be a leak between wherever the fuel is to the injection pump. So verify that. Put it under vacuum. Test and see if it holds. Put it under pressure. See if it holds. But yeah, so that's the basics of the engine. So timing needs to be done, of course. We need to have fuel, and we need to have power, or we need to have power. And for the most part, it should start, okay? In addition to this, if you're still having a no crank condition, take a little bit of ether, a little bit. That's it. Take off your intake, spray it in, try to start it. If the engine runs for a second, half a second, whatever it might be, and dies, now it could be the IMMO, of course, the security into the ECU. But if all that's done the way it's supposed to, then you spray it in here, the engine starts, we have a fuel issue, right? If you spray it in here and it doesn't start, we don't have a fuel issue, we have something else. We need to go back to timing and fuel. And then if those are all perfectly fine, we need to go to Harbor Freight and get a cheap little compression tester and test for compression inside each one of the cylinders. Again, each one of these engines is different. You have no idea the condition of the engine when you bought it. Sometimes you have no idea the shitbird that owned the engine before you, sometimes. So that's when further diagnostics are needed. But we're going based on the assumption that the engine works the way it's supposed to. All right, the next super important thing to have is an OBD2 port that works. It is a power, a ground, and the K line for the ALH. Do you want to do CAN bus and everything else? That's perfectly fine. That's up to you. But at minimum, we need a working OBD2. And that's a K line, which is communications to the ECU. There's two powers. One's supposed to be constant, one's supposed to be ignition. I power them both by ignition. I power everything on this ECU with ignition power. And then the grounds. So again, you can look up those schematics. I don't know if I have them anywhere, but you can look them up. So once that's all done, let's say we've got the engine running the way it's... Let's go back. Let's say we don't have the engine running. Now we need to do what's called looking up codes. So when people ask you for codes, they're asking you to use VCDS. Now, for those who don't know, there are a few different types of VCDS. These are all legitimate dongles that I've purchased recently. This is the wireless one, the hex.net, and then this is just the regular hex 2. My laptop only has USB-Cs, so I need an adapter. I do, of course, have the old hacked versions, and I do have OBD2 readers, the wireless ones as well. But I recommend, before you start doing any sort of diagnosing or swapping or anything else, get a legitimate copy of VCDS or get a cloned copy of VCDS. Not OBD2, we're not looking for P codes, we're looking for actual VAG diagnostic codes to help you. They're asking you to go into select, and then engine, and then faults, which is this first one once it pops up. So yeah, if we have fault codes, hopefully I do not, but if we have fault codes, this is what we're asking. Tell us the fault codes in VCDS. Don't give me some generic OBD2 P series. Give me the actual fault codes that pop up here. That way we can go from there. All right, so we've got the engine running. It's running the way it's supposed to. We let it warm up a little bit. We're going to check for two things as part of timing. We're going to check IQ, injection quantity, which is on the pump, and we adjust that based on the hammer mod and adaptation. My recommendation is only do the pump mod, the hammer mod. And then we're going to check timing, okay? The first thing you want to do is check timing. So when you come in here, I guess the engine is, of course the engine's not running, so we'll see if it'll work. But you go to basic settings, you click up, measuring blocks, and then normally the TDI timing graph pops up down here. There's a little button that pops up right here that says TDI timing. So you'll click on that. I'll insert a picture here. So you click on that, you go down to the drop down, you choose the appropriate ALH, there are two ALHs, and you put it where, you know, your tuner specifies. I think I run mine in the 60s, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Okay, so now that we've done that, we can go back. We can technically do it here, but let's go back. We will go to measuring blocks. We will look up the IQ, the injection quantity. All right, so here's injection quantity. It's 2.2 to 9. Talk with your tuner and see where he or she wants you to put it. I normally run mine around 4 to 4.4, but talk with your tuner and go from there. So we've done mechanical timing. The engine runs. We've done the graph timing, which again, let's go back. I'm trying to look through the phone. We'll go back. We'll go to basic settings. We click up. We switch to measuring blocks, and over here, when the engine is running, there's something that pops up. And when it pops up, it says TDI timing graph or something like that. Again, I just posted a picture earlier, so you should understand that. So, mechanical timing here with the graph, injection quantity, and that should be it. Nothing should really ever change until you start working on it again. But yeah, hopefully this video helps you out. Best of luck in your swaps.
Drown me in your touch, let me show you devotion. Let me light you up, I just wanna show you. Dance on my